Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm taking a look, or at least a quick look. This is sort of a quick review of the Retrobit Tribute 64. This is the USB version of this controller. Now, if you are an emulator fan, this controller is something you may be very interested in because, as you probably know, there are just not very many good N64 alternatives on the market, especially on the PC side. There's just really nothing good out there that's actually affordable and reasonably cheap, but this thing actually looks to change that. Now, to get started with this guy, I will point out there are a couple of similar gamepads with alternative N64 layouts that actually utilize a reasonably good analog stick just like this one. One of those is the Brawler 64, though last I checked it was about $40, and I'll link all of these, by the way, down below to the Amazon links in case you're interested in picking up different ones. And the other one that looks nearly identical to this guy is the Hori Mini Pad. And the difference is, though, that one must not be in production anymore because it's ridiculously expensive. Either that or it's just always been really, really expensive. Whereas this guy is supposed to retail at MSRP for around $25, I think, though I picked mine up for about $30 on Amazon, which is still, again, last I checked, about $10 cheaper than the Brawler 64. And $40 is really getting pretty expensive for a controller that's basically aimed at the emulator market with the USB end, though they do make this one, Retrobit does, that is, with an N64 cable on it as well, so you can actually plug this into your N64 if you still have one that works. Now, in the hand, this controller is not fantastic. It's not perfect. I would say that the actual handles are a little bit on the small side, and I even don't have gigantic hands. So it's a little bit on the cramped side even for me, but it is definitely usable, and if you do have larger hands, it will be a little bit less comfortable still yet. But it's still usable, and the layout is a button configuration that you just don't see much, which is actually really important for a lot of these N64 games, especially games like those old Zeldas, Ocarina of Time, and Majora's Mask that utilize these C buttons to actually use weapons and items, whereas with using something like an Xbox controller, you have two sticks, which you can map one of the analog sticks to the C buttons. The problem with that, of course, is that those sticks aren't really great for using items in game, especially, again, going back to Ocarina of Time. It's a little bit annoying to hit the stick to pull out something like a bow and arrow or a slingshot, whereas these buttons work really well for that. Now, one of the first things that you will notice when you pick up this controller is just how light it is, and I don't know if it's just that I don't use controllers anymore that don't have batteries in them because all of my controllers are wireless, but it was very light when I picked it up, and that was the first thing that I noticed at least, and it weighs in at 141 grams, at least just the body part does. If you stack the cable on it as well, you're looking at 224 grams, so obviously the cable's a big chunk of that weight, so the body of the controller itself, 141, now it's 142 grams. So it is very light to hold in your hand, and you definitely won't suffer from fatigue. Speaking of which, I believe this is a 10-foot cable, so while you are tethered to the device you're playing on, they do give you plenty of cable to work with, and the nice bit about a USB cable is getting an extension is also extremely cheap. You can find those all over Amazon, and they are very cheap if you really need something longer than 10 feet. I will say I actually like the layout of this controller quite a bit because it does give us access to all of our buttons and sticks at the same time without having to move our hands over like we did with the original N64 layout. And on the backside, the other notable bit is you have your R and L buttons like normal, but then the Z trigger is on both sides, so you can actually use the Z on either side that you prefer. Now, to talk a little bit about gameplay, I did have to adjust the sensitivity, and I was playing 007 in this particular gameplay footage, but I did have to adjust the analog stick sensitivity just a little bit to get it to feel about right, and that seemed to work pretty well at about 60%. It defaulted to, I believe, 65%, so I did make it a little bit less sensitive, and after a couple of missions, I kind of got back in the swing of playing this game because it does have such a sort of different layout for the controller because it's utilizing a controller with just one analog stick for its button configuration. So playing an FPS game where you only have one stick and the right stick isn't there to look around is a little bit different, but it actually works fairly well, or at least as well as it originally worked with the original N64 controller, and that's really what I was looking for with this particular controller, was just an authentic experience on an emulator. So that's just my quick review of this Retrobit Tribute 64 with the USB end. I will again link all those controllers that I mentioned down below in case you're interested in checking them out for your own use case, or potentially even you could use this very easily with an SNES emulator or even NES all those would work just fine with this controller. But really, it's geared towards that N64 market where there's just not very many good alternatives out there, and some of the knockoff N64 controllers are just awful. If you've ever purchased one like I have, you may have had a bad experience with that analog stick. Some of them are truly awful. So I want to hear from you guys. Have you had experience yet? I know this is a new product, but if you have one of these, let me know in those comments down below. And as always, if you like this video, hey, give it a like, share, subscribe, and comment. You can follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware. And as always, I'll let YouTube queue up a couple more videos from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I'll see you guys in the next video.